Hey guys, welcome to another installment of Lord of the Flies. Today we'll be talking about chapters 7 and 8. So the first chapter mainly discusses how the two groups of children end up being split up, and that's mainly due to a rivalry between Ralph and Jack. So there's further discussion of the beast. And what we have is Ralph actually goes on a hunting trip with the hunters. And what he notices is he experiences the thrill of hunting. He sees a pig and he spears the pig and no one else is able to, which kind of hints at this idea that maybe Ralph is a better hunter than Jack. He has just never entertained that idea. However, the pig gets away and the boys begin talking about it. What Ralph keeps saying to the other kids is, I stabbed the pig, I stabbed the pig, I stabbed the pig, as if to show the reader, hey, Ralph can feel that desire for savagery as well. He's just been putting it off for the sake of civilization. What the hunters then do, begin talking about what their close encounter with the pig, and Roger is actually acting as the pig, and then they form a circle and start actually hurting him. It starts as a game, but then it goes a little too far, and the boy starts to cry. This is hinting at this idea that the boys are now blurring the lines between killing pigs and the excitement of the bloodlust for that, and actual bloodlust for killing one of their own. So that scene eventually ends and dissipates, and then they go back to the campsite. When they're back at the campsite, Jack says he wants to find the beast. It's up on the mountain. And what happens is he asks Ralph, are you coming? Now this is the power struggle at play here. We have Jack taunting Ralph into going with him to show this idea of, will he take the challenge or will he be seen as weak? Throughout this whole story, what we see is a constant struggle between Ralph and Jack trying to one-up each other. Of course, with hesitancy, Ralph accepts and they begin walking up the mountain. They notice a third kid is with them. When they get to the foot of the mountain, Jack decides to go up and Ralph says he'll stay there. Ralph goes up and then comes back and says, I saw a bulge. There's this thing that moved. And Ralph says, no, that there can't be. There is no such thing as a beast. And so he goes up the mountain. He then sees the same thing. Again, dramatic irony is at play here. So we know it's the parachuter, but they believe it to be a beast. And then they go down. They start having a conversation, the boys do, and eventually there's an altercation where Jack wants to speak, Ralph challenges his authority, and then Jack eventually goes, fine, I don't want to play with you anymore, and leaves. This is the first divide. He then goes, if anyone wants to come with me, they can, this is what I'll be. Eventually the night ends, and then the next morning, Piggy and Ralph have a conversation where it seems like several of the boys are missing. What you find out is all the hunters decided to go with Jack. So that's the end of the first chapter that we'll be talking about. Now the second chapter is what happens when we have those two camps. We have Ralph, who's still set on, remember, the roles of society and roles of civilization. And then we have Jack, who is focused on hunting. Now, Jack has power. His power is legitimized. Ralph still has the initial power with Piggy, or Piggy being almost this advisor role. So now we're going to talk about these narratives kind of separately. We have Ralph, we have Jack, and then we have Simon, and we'll talk about a little bit later into the video. So let's start with Jack, where he notices a lot of his people are missing, and he begins wondering, okay, what do we do? We're now seeing now that the the hunters are gone, Ralph loses his ability to speak eloquently towards the kids. He feels that innate desire to go be with the savages, but he knows that civilization is paramount, and so again, he consistently throughout this entire novel talks about building the fire and the shifts and where did the boys go and who left and how can we legitimize this fire because we can't go back up the mountain. But thankfully to Piggy's glasses, he is able to start a fire and they begin doing shifts. Now let's shift to Jack. Jack now has power. He is able to be with hunters that also have the strength. So now we have a leader with strength of the hunters. So as the hunters do, they go for a hunt. When they do, they find a pig and eventually they chase it down, they stab it. And this is the most important probably part of the scene, is he decides to look at the blood, rub it on his face, rub it on some of the boys' faces, and then cut off the head of the pig and put it on a stake and leave it there as a sacrifice to the beast. Now, the beast represents savagery. It represents the innate desire for evil. What's symbolic here is that by having that piece be left for the beast is this almost allegiance to savagery. At this point in the novel, the blood and all of that can symbolize the complete turn to corruption and savagery within the boys. When they're cutting up the pigs, they realize, oh no, we don't have a fire. We don't have ability to start a fire. So Jack comes up with the plan to steal fire from the original campsite with Ralph, invite any boys that want to be with him can come and eat, and they can go. So they do that. They stage this raid on the campground of Ralph, and it says that you can't recognize him. Jack is represented as the tall one. The two other boys, Robert and Maurice, are seen as almost foils to Sam and Eric, right? They're similar, but you can't tell their appearance. This is to show again, not only the savagery within themselves, but the physical attributes. They are not themselves anymore. So the raid goes well, they steal fire, and Jack makes the claim, if anyone wants to come with me, they can. He begins to hear murmurs of the little ones talking about wanting to eat. We hear several other kids talking about, well, it would be fun to play with them. They have food, they have the ability to help us, so why don't we go to them? We then have Ralph's another amazing speech, but this time it doesn't go very well. He can't form a coherent thought. He talks about the fire, but all he can think about is, well, I kind of wish I could be one of the hunters too, but I can't, because the fire is the only thing keeping us safe, and if I knew we would never be saved, I would lean towards that way too. He's struggling with this desire for civilization, but also the recognition of the euphoria that he had before when he went with the hunters. So that's where it ends with Ralph. So now let's talk a little bit about Simon and the pig head. Simon is one of the hunters, however, he doesn't really fit with the group. When the boys leave, he's left alone with the pig head on the stake. It describes very gruesomely that flies are pouring from the mouth and through the eyes, and it's legitimately a decaying pig head. However, to Simon, it's referred to as the Lord of the Flies, the name of the book. Now, this is the beast. It identifies as the beast. It is at the point where savagery is incarnate, in a way, where this is the pinnacle of savagery within the hunters and within the hearts of the kids. So the conversation between Simon and Lord of the Flies is this internal struggle of, what do I do? Do I go with Ralph And do I keep this goodness? Remember, Simon almost represents this good figure. Or do I give in to the desires of the hunters? The pig head, one Lord of the Flies, calls him an ignorant boy and says, oh, you think you're so good, but you know in yourself you're one of us. You want to be savage. You want this innate desire of evil. So what's it going to be? Come on, indulge in this. And it's almost this temptation here. It's this internal struggle between good and evil. And what is Simon going to choose? If he's then corrupt, any of them could truly become corrupt as well. And then it says, under immense pressure, Simon falls to the ground unconscious. And that's where the chapter ends. So what is the big takeaways of this? First, the culmination of the power struggle between, now we have two separate camps. We now have the loss of true power from Ralph, and then because of that loss of power, no longer is able to keep his own people. We have Jack's camp gaining strength and showing that not only does he gain power from people coming into his group, but also they have the strength and the force to sustain it to the point where they can easily raid another camp and get away with it. And then last we have Simon, of the internal struggle between savagery and goodness. As we see in this novel, it's kind of taken a darker turn, and so now we have to figure out what Golding is trying to say here is when left to your own devices, with a good leader and a numbing of morality, truly evil can take place in anyone, from Jack to Simon to Ralph. So with that ends our assignment for the week, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.